Okay, so real question. Why does the Bible introduce the tree of life in Genesis and then lock it up behind angel security and then casually bring it back in Revelation like, oh yeah, it's back? Like, hey guys, excuse me. Genesis isn't written like a science textbook or a fantasy novel. So, what is the tree of life in Genesis 2? Genesis 2 actually says that God made trees that were pleasant to sight, good for food, and then it names the two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And here's the part that people miss. It says the tree of life was in the midst of the garden. In Hebrew, that idea is basically right in the middle, like center stage. So Eden isn't just a garden with a tree, it's more like a garden arranged around this thing. And I don't know about you, but when the Bible puts something in the middle, it's usually not random. It's usually like a neon sign that says, pay attention. So the tree of life in Hebrew is actually Etz HaHayim. Etz meaning tree, and Hayim meaning life. And life in the Bible doesn't just mean not dead. It's the idea of life as God intended it. Fullness, blessing, flourishing, peace, and communion with God. So the tree of life is basically a picture of life with God, from God, and sustained by God. Not like main character energy, more like dependent creature imagery. Okay, so is this a literal tree? Is it a symbol? Is it a metaphor? Well, yes, and let me explain why. So honestly, the best way to understand this is the tree of life is presented as a real tree in the story. It's also a physical sign of spiritual reality. Think of it like this. You know how Jesus will sometimes take something physical, like bread, and then he'll teach something massive about it. Not because the bread is magic itself, but because of what it means. Genesis is doing that kind of thing early. So the tree isn't just a Disney prop. It's a theological object lesson built into creation. And the biggest clue is what happens after sin. Suddenly it's guarded. But why was it guarded? After Adam and Eve sin in Genesis 3, God drives them out. And it says something that's honestly very intense. God says the humans might reach out and eat from the tree of life and live forever. So God places cherubim to guard the way. Now pause, and this is where people get uncomfortable because it sounds like, hold on, wait, God is blocking eternal life? Why would he do that? But here's the thing. Eternal life isn't automatically a blessing if you're eternally broken. Ooh, think about that, huh? That would be like freezing a corrupted file permanently. Like, congrats! It's corrupted forever. So guarding the tree of life is judgment, yes, but it's also mercy, because living forever in sin, decay, alienation, and death, that's not paradise. That's the opposite of Eden. I don't know if y'all want to live on this earth forever like that, do you? I know I don't. And then who are these cherubim? They're not chubby baby angels, like we picture, because of stories and stuff like that. In the Bible, cherubim are actually guardians of sacred space. They're like, big tough angel guys. When you see them later in tabernacle imagery, in the temple, connected to the holiness of God's presence, Eden is being presented like sacred space, like the first sanctuary, which means the tree of life was not just a plant. It's the center of life with God. And here's the big idea. Eden isn't just where humans lived. Eden is where humans lived with God. If you think about it, it almost sounds like what they describe in Revelation with the New Jerusalem. And the tree of life is basically saying life is received, not seized. So how does the tree of life show up elsewhere in the Bible? And this is where it gets actually really cool and interesting, because the tree of life doesn't vanish after Genesis. It shows up again in a totally different way. Proverbs says things like, wisdom is a tree of life. Righteousness is a tree of life. Gentle speech is a tree of life. And it's basically saying when you live in God's wisdom, it produces life. And when you live outside of it, it produces death. So the tree of life becomes a biblical symbol for flourishing, healing, stability, almost like this is the path that leads to life, which is the exact theme Jesus teaches too. He teaches two paths, two destinations. So where did it go? Well, it returns again in Revelation. Revelation describes it as the river of the water of life, flowing from God's throne, and the tree of life is there again. and it says that it bears fruit, and its leaves are the healing of the nations. So the Bible begins with a guarded tree, and it ends with access restored, which means the tree of life is basically the Bible's storyline in one image. Life was offered, life was lost, and life was restored. And the crazy part is the Bible doesn't treat this like a side detail. It treats it like an end goal. Okay, so now you might be asking, why are there two trees? Well, here's the simplest way to say it. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents the human desire to define reality without God. It's like saying, I don't just want to be a creature, I also want to be a judge. And Genesis is showing you that when humans try to seize moral authority for themselves, everything fractures, and it's still happening today. So the tree of life becomes the symbol of what humans are made for, and what humans lost through sin. So where does Jesus fit in with all this in the New Testament? Well, here's where Christians see this as more than just ancient symbolism. Because when Jesus shows up, he starts saying things like, I am the life, I am the bread of life, whoever believes in me has eternal life. And the New Testament describes Jesus' work like the reversal of Eden's exile, like access is being reopened. And that's why the cross matters so much to this storyline, because the story isn't just humans climbing back into Eden, it's God bringing life back to humans. So Eden is not just about a garden you can't find, it's about a life you can't earn. And the tree of life is a visual symbol of that life that you can't get back without Jesus. Boom, mic drop. So what's the takeaway? The tree of life is basically telling you, you were made for life that comes from God, not life you manufacture through control, pride, or definition. And the Bible ends saying, God isn't just saving individual souls, He's healing the world. He's healing the nations. So next we're going to talk about the question that everybody asks right after Eden. Who was Cain's wife? Because once you understand how Genesis is written, that question has a way more grounded answer than people think.